How rich and powerful are the Rothschild family? If you know a thing or two about conspiracy theories, then you've probably heard about the Rothschilds. This family has been accused of doing some of the wildest things imaginable, and some things that are admittedly pretty plausible. When people talk about the Rothschilds, it's usually about how they're either secretly controlling the weather or somehow in charge of 80% of the money in circulation around the world. So, how powerful are the Rothschilds really? More conservative estimates of their net worth put them at an insane combined net worth of $400 billion. Although there are some estimates that are really out there, ranging from $1 trillion to $500 trillion. We're gonna find out how rich this historic family really is, how powerful they are, and if the many conspiracy theories have a tinge of truth to them. However, before we can even hope to grasp the wealth and power of the Rothschilds, we need to look into the rich and storied history of their past, to a time before the family was split into several descendants, during the peak of their power. So, who are the Rothschilds? Well, the Rothschilds are some very, very rich people. They're an influential banking dynasty, originating in Frankfurt, Germany. The family's empire was established by Meyer Emschel Rothschild back in the 18th century, growing in size and prominence under his 5 sons. Meyer Rothschild learned business at a young age. His father dealt in silk cloth and exchanged currency, and one of Meyer's first jobs was sorting coins. His parents died when he was only 12 years old and was sent to apprentice with a prominent banking house. That's right, this apparent trillion-dollar empire started off with a proper rags-to-riches story, or at least a silk-to-riches story. The Rothschilds might have started off running a relatively small business trading goods, but they would eventually become pioneers in the development of international finance, establishing branches in London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples, and Frankfurt, basically all of Western Europe. Soon their business activities would include banking, asset management, venture capital, and sovereign debt, to name a few. The Rothschilds have been involved in some incredibly important infrastructure projects, like bridges, tunnels, railways, and most notably, the Suez Canal. You know, that thing that changed the very face of maritime trade forever? The Rothschilds were obviously no ordinary family, and they weren't dealing with ordinary customers either. They had several close ties with royalty, and would become elevated to nobility themselves. One example of this is how they would trade rare coins with the Crown Prince Wilhelm of Hesse and win his patronage, an important business relationship that would allow them to develop even more ties with nobles, as well as a lucrative job as a crown agent, having effectively established a banking empire that spread across Europe, creating the first bank to transcend borders. On top of their strong ties to nobility, the Rothschilds were powerful enough to lend money to entire governments. They could supply enough coin to the Bank of England to avert a market liquidity crisis and grant massive loans to different European countries, usually the ones looking to start a fight and in need of a heavy purse. Having successfully adapted to the Industrial Revolution, the Rothschilds were making even more money, especially with their oligopolistic position in the world trade of oil and metals. With several centuries of accumulated bonds and built-up wealth in a range of different industries, the Rothschilds would be able to accumulate an almost mythical amount of money. And trust me, they were going to keep all that money in the family. Before he died, Meyer Rothschild left strict instructions for his heirs on how they should handle family finances. He outlined a rigid patrilineal system of succession to ensure titles and properties could only pass through the male line, and the female descendants were excluded from any direct inheritance. This might have encouraged getting a little too close to your family. Quite a few of the Rothschilds would end up marrying first or second cousins, creating a family tree that looks a lot more like a vine. We've seen how the Rothschilds grew so wealthy and powerful, but how powerful were they exactly? Out of the 4 sons of Meyer Rothschild, the most successful one was his 3rd son, Nathan. He moved to England, where he would establish himself in London as a banker and set up N.M. Rothschild in 1810, the flagship of the Rothschilds banking group that is somehow still in operation today. And it isn't just in operation either. N.M. Rothschild & Sons has a reported revenue of $1.7 billion and $83 billion in assets under management. This bank, like the other Rothschild banks, was responsible for furnishing credit to the British government during times of crisis, like during the Napoleonic Wars, almost single-handedly financing the war effort. The Rothschilds would also corner the market for valuable natural resources. They would secure the rights to mercury mines in Spain, gaining a virtual world monopoly on a chemical element critical to refining gold and silver. And they figured, since we already have the mercury, might as well get the silver and gold. So they went ahead and casually began refining gold and silver for the Bank of England and the Royal Mint. The Rothschilds were sure to direct their extreme wealth towards some extensive amounts of philanthropy as well, supporting Jewish communities throughout Europe. Nathan's youngest child, Louise, and her 7 daughters would eventually take responsibility for many of the 30 Rothschild charitable foundations in Frankfurt. These foundations included public libraries, orphanages, hospitals, homes for the elderly, and special funds allocated for education. In addition to their charity, the family would give an estimated 60,000 pieces of artwork to public institutions. The Rothschild family would also expand the creation of social housing in the cities of London and Paris. Despite the wealth the family retains to this day, it's pretty obvious their power and influence in society has diminished quite a bit, or at the very least faded into the background. So what exactly happened to the Rothschilds? How did they go from financing governments to only showing up in conspiracy theories? Thanks to the wars, politics, and some unhealthy family rivalries, the wealth of the Rothschilds has diminished some over the past 100 years. The Naples branch of the Rothschild Bank was the first to close in 1863. A lack of male heirs led to the closure of the Frankfurt branch, and the invasion of Austria during World War II saw to the closure of the branch over there as well. World War II didn't do the Rothschilds' wealth any favors. Their properties were either expropriated or straight up confiscated. Millions of dollars worth of art and other precious objects were simply just taken. By the 70s, only 3 Rothschild banks remained: the London, Paris, and Swiss branches. By 2008, all of the holdings were reorganized under a single company, finally unifying the family businesses about 2 centuries too late. By the time the 21st century rolled around, the Rothschilds' family wealth had been divided among the many descendants and their heirs, although they still retained holdings in several industries, like financial services, real estate, mining, and energy. They did manage to keep the family wealth together, thanks to investments in closely held corporations, the kind that tends to employ family members, keeping it very tight-knit and generating some of that family wealth. Let's just hope they aren't still following the old rules for inheritance, or they must be having some pretty awkward family gatherings. So, what are the Rothschilds getting down to these days? Other than financing global operations, contributing to scholarly and humanitarian endeavors, and apparently secretly running every central bank in the world, that is. Many members of the Rothschild family remain pretty low-key, but not all of them. Some of the richest members have gathered for themselves a bit of renown on top of their fat net worth. Here are a few of the most popular and wealthiest members of the Rothschilds, and what they've been getting into. First, you've got Nathaniel Rothschild, with a net worth of $1 billion. He's been dubbed by the New York Times as the man who may become the richest Rothschild. He's the heir apparent to the title Baron Rothschild, which is currently held by his father, Jacob. Nathaniel has built upon his family's wealth and amassed a wide range of business interests, from hedge funds to investing in coal mining across the world. His net worth is estimated to be about $1 billion, although he is rumored to be in line for a $40 billion inheritance set up in Swiss trusts. Hey, it's the Rothschilds we're talking about. I'd be shocked if it wasn't more. You've also got Ariane de Rothschild, with her net worth of $1.5 billion. She's the wife of the late Benjamin de Rothschild. He and Ariane married in '99, and together they had 4 daughters. She is herself a banker, and is also the first woman to ever run a Rothschild banking institution. Then there's James Rothschild, who isn't just famous for his net worth of $1.5 billion. He's also the husband of wealthy heiress and socialite Nikki Hilton. He works for the Rothschild Asset Management, of course, and is the son of the late Amschel Rothschild, one of the richest members of the British branch of the family. Then we have Jacob Rothschild, 4th Baron Rothschild, or to quote his full title, the Right Honorable Lord Rothschild OMGBE CVO FRCA Nathaniel Charles Jacob Rothschild. Yeah, it's a mouthful, and that's the short version. He's also got a net worth of $5 billion. He's a banker with ties to oil and gas, connections with leading political figures, and a patron of the arts in the United Kingdom, earning him a litany of awards. On the wealthier side of the Rothschild family, we have David Meyer de Rothschild, with a net worth of $10 billion. David is a well-known adventurer and environmentalist who has made several polar and tropical expeditions and has sailed the oceans to raise awareness for pollution. He's published a series of books on his experiences traveling to remote regions. You're probably wondering how he's one of the wealthiest members of the family, despite all his adventuring. Well, sources say his sizable wealth is all thanks to an equally sizable inheritance. Perhaps the richest member of the Rothschild family is Sir Evelyn de Rothschild, with a net worth of $20 billion. He's also one of the oldest, being born in 1931. He hasn't just served as a banker like a lot of the other Rothschilds. He's held positions at leading newspapers, race courses, and different financial corporations. Pretty fitting for one of the richest individuals in Britain. So how rich and powerful do you think the Rothschilds actually are? And is there any truth to the conspiracy theories? If you enjoyed this video, then you're in luck. I've got even better videos for you right here. Why don't you check it out? See you there.